to be monitoring and protecting our land and waters especially.
Tonight, 'tis the season to fight another injunction in the battle over fish farms.
I'm not the only one here at the lighthouse that appreciates and accepts and will definitely eat.
The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations brings traditional foods to the people in urban centers. And a 17-year-old offensive lineman gets signed on for college football. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. A British Columbia court is still deciding if protesters can occupy fish farms owned by one company in the province. Marine Harvest went to court seeking an injunction against fish farm occupations. But as Lori Hamlin explains, there are still bigger legal battles to come over fish farms in BC.
A collective of First Nations in BC's Broughton Archipelago say fish farms are operating without their consent and they want them gone. For 2 months, Midsummer Island Fish Farm, off the northern coast of Vancouver Island, has been occupied by First Nations activists.
We have the right as Indigenous people to be monitoring and protecting our land and waters especially.
The facility is owned by Marine Harvest Canada, one of the largest Atlantic salmon fish farm companies in the world. And the company wants the protesters off. They served an injunction order on November 11th, which is being considered by BC's Supreme Court. Until they rule on the injunction, the court ordered protesters to stay away from Midsummer Fish Farm. But the court's decision will only decide if protesters are allowed on the fish farm. The big issue, are fish farms allowed to operate at all, is a legal battle over Aboriginal rights and title.
Our pursuit of this is to hold the government to account to its own law.
Both Canada and BC have committed to implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
I think what everyone needs to understand more clearly is that we're standing up for the protection of our food source of wild salmon. And that certainly is something that's found in the UN Declaration in many different ways.
The BC government has final say on whether fish farms can operate. Their licenses are up for renewal this summer, and there's big pressure on the province to shut them down. Chief Bob Chamberlain says fish farms can't operate without their consent.
We as First Nations, like many others, have done our homework. We understand the Constitution. We understand the Supreme Court of Canada ruling. We understand the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People.
The BC Supreme Court will decide whether to allow protesters on Marine Harvest Midsummer Fish Farm any day now. But that battle is also far from over. Cermak Canada, another BC salmon farm owner, served their own injunction against protesters. That injunction is now making its way through the courts. Lori Hamlin, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Still in British Columbia, where the government has announced that they are banning the hunting of grizzly bears for sport. APTN's Tina House has the story.
At this press conference in Vancouver, the BC government announced the end of sport hunting of grizzly bears.
Protecting this iconic species is simply the right thing to do.
Since 1975, nearly 14,000 grizzly bears have been killed for trophy hunting across BC. Now, it will be illegal to hunt grizzly bears, with the exception of First Nations, who are allowed to hunt for food and ceremonial purposes.
The First Nations in the Great Bear Rainforest, who have been campaigning on this issue, campaigned on the basis that trophy hunting was a contravention of our own laws, our Indigenous laws. And I think it's really important that in its announcement, the BC government acknowledged that Indigenous law.
Income from bear hunts will be offset by bear viewing. That generates millions of dollars in tourism in the province.
I really want to congratulate the BC government on listening to the feedback that they got on their initial proposal for a ban and removing the loophole around packing out meat. I think that ultimately the shape that the ban has taken now is much stronger than what they initially proposed, and that came from feedback from First Nations and from British Columbians.
The annual spring grizzly bear hunt was to have opened in April of 2018. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
And we would like to hear what you have to say about this or any other story. Here's how to contact us. Send an email to news@aptn.ca. like our APTN National News Facebook page, follow us on Twitter at APTN News, or go to our website, aptnnews.ca. A new member of the Thunder Bay Police Board was sworn in this week. An Indigenous lawyer fills the position, bringing some hope after a year of challenging times for the city and police. Willow Fiddler tells us more from Thunder Bay.
Selena Reitberger wants to help the police do their jobs better. She was sworn in this week as Thunder Bay Police Service's newest board member. Reitberger worked for Anishinaabe Legal Services for 15 years, helping people know their rights when it comes to police and also understanding the challenges the police face.
And I think what we have to do is acknowledge that they have an incredible job to do and say, how can we help them do it better? By giving them an understanding of, the people that they're dealing with.
She hopes her appointment can create change in the city.
What I hope to accomplish is building bridges. I'm hoping that there can be opportunities for training, for, cultural sensitivity, both for the board and it might spill over to the police.
That might be starting to happen. Last November, the province's police watchdog started a review of how Thunder Bay police Indigenous people. Then this past summer, a separate investigation into the police board over serious concerns of its public confidence and police oversight.
If you want to affect change, I think you can do it better from the inside than being on the outside looking in.
Reitberger believes police have to understand how the traumas suffered from residential schools and the 60s scoop are affecting Indigenous people today.
And when the police are dealing with these very difficult situations, we want to have some humanity and knowledge of where they're coming from.
Police Board Chair Jackie Dojak welcomed Reitberger's appointment.
That she really is going to, bring that Indigenous perspective to us, as an Indigenous person, but also somebody who's worked for Indigenous organizations, and really can, continuously bring that Indigenous perspective to the work that we do as a board.
The board meets monthly, and they have plans to hold an anti-racism conference in the new year. Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
Now an update on a story we brought you earlier in the week. 38-year-old Charmin Smith, who was given a 9-year sentence in a Turkish prison for drug trafficking, has been given the okay to be transferred and serve out her 9-year sentence back in Canada. But the transfer still needs to be approved by the Canadian government. A Yukon legal advocate who's taken on Smith's case says both Turkish officials and Canadian consular officials have agreed to an international prison transfer. But she says that will take some time. To help with the transfer, Smith's Turkish lawyer will need to become her power of attorney.
So the Turkish consulate has confirmed with the government that they're prepared to offer this transfer to Charmin. So it's a go. There's 2 steps to take. One's a power of attorney and one's with the lower court, and then the Canadian government will agree and then they can proceed from there.
Federal government has rolled out its long-awaited plan for providing pensions to injured veterans.
Pension for Life option has 3 pillars designed to work in concert to provide recognition, income support, and stability to members and their families as they transition to a life after service with an illness or injury.
The Liberals made the promise to reinstate lifelong pensions for disabled veterans during the election campaign in 2015. The lifelong pension was replaced by a controversial lump sum award back in 2006. That plan was met with complaints that the new benefits amounted to much less financial assistance. Plans for a new centre for Inuit art received a $10 million boost this week, but that is millions short of what initially was promised. That story and more after the break. Here's a look at Thursday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. -1 in St. John's, sunny, and -8 in Fredericton. Snow for Happy Valley Goose Bay and a high of 0. A cloudy day and 0 in Cartwright. minus 20 under the sun in Chibougamau, minus 9 in Sept-Îles. Snow on the way for Toronto and a high of minus 2, sunny and minus 12 in Ottawa, minus 8 in Thunder Bay, minus 17 for Sioux Lookout. Another cold day in northern Manitoba, minus 24 in Churchill, minus 20 in Island Lake, minus 15 for Barons River and Winnipeg, sunny and minus 16 in Brandon. Over to Saskatchewan, minus 10 in Estevan, Saskatoon and North Battleford, minus 16 on Thursday in Stony Rapids, minus 15 in Uranium City. Welcome back. In the spirit of Christmas, the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations is giving back to people living within urban centres in Saskatchewan. Over 2,000 pounds of traditional meat harvested in Saskatchewan is being donated to several organizations and families. APTN's Larissa Burnoff has more.
It's a much appreciated gift that is spreading holiday cheer around Saskatchewan. FSIN Chief Bobby Cameron followed through with a promise he made earlier this year to supply the Saskatoon Lighthouse with traditional meats for their clients just in time for Christmas.
We get moose meat, so yeah, I'm not the only one here at the Lighthouse that appreciates and accepts and will definitely eat.
I lived this life. I lived this life in Battleford. Growing up in poverty, hungry every day for days at a time. I lived this. I lived the life. So I'm now in a position where I can offer some light, some hope, some opportunities for our people to enjoy a traditional meal.
The Lighthouse was one of 2 stops in Saskatoon. Hundreds of pounds of traditional meat was also delivered to students at the Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technologies.
It's great. I mean, it helps cut down the cost, right, of, the expenses of, being a student, right?
SIIT CEO Riel Bellegarde welcomed the donation, saying Christmas time can often be a struggle for students and their families.
Many of them come to us with young families, right, and take care of a broader family, right? So anything we can do to help them during this time of year, right? Everyone knows that during Christmas there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of struggles, and so today is just kind of a recognition of just their hard work, their commitment, and just trying to make life a little bit easier for them.
Chief Cameron says the FSIN is happy to supply traditional foods to families, especially those living in the urban centers that rarely have access to it. They're also making donations in Prince Albert, North Battleford, and Regina. Larissa Burnoff, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
To Manitoba now, where the mayor of Churchill says the town is going through serious challenges. The railway has been the mainstay of getting supplies in, but food prices have spiked since the tracks washed out last spring. Some supplies are on their way for the first time via ice road, but as CTV's Sarah Plowman reports, some residents may use that route to leave.
About 300 kilometers south of Churchill, this vehicle known as a cat train sleigh crawls north. The new ice road will help supplies move in. Roberta Wokes is considering using that ice road to move out.
I'm hoping that it's also going to be to move people out, because otherwise, let's just say, for instance, if I was to leave, I couldn't take anything with me. As it stands right now, I have to leave my vehicle, I have to sell everything I own, everything I've worked so hard for to get, I have to leave it behind.
A broken rail line has cut off this community since May. David Daly is with the Chamber of Commerce.
The school went from, I'm pretty sure it was lost over almost 40 kids in the school from families moving away.
Increased prices are gouging pocketbooks. Gas sells for $2.20 a liter. At a local grocery store, a package of Kraft singles is nearly $18. A loaf of bread, nearly $6. A 10-kilogram bag of flour is $34.
Right now in Churchill, a jug of milk, a 4-liter jug of milk is $12, and before the train went out, it was $6. And it's $12 with the subsidies that are applied to it already.
As the federal government and the rail line's owner, Omnitrax, launch court battles over who's to blame and who should pay, people here feel there's been lots of talk but little action. Mayor Mike Spence thinks the federal government has shown leadership. He's part of a conglomerate vying to buy the port and the rail line.
It's changing the page. It's not relying on government to basically pave the way. That is not where we're going. It needs to make business sense.
Wilkes' son moved to Gillam, the next town over, 2 days before the rail service stopped. She's only seen him once.
It's only a town away and I can't get to him. I have to fly to Winnipeg or fly to Thompson and then drive up to Thompson. That's the only way I can get to see him.
The distance, once easily traveled, now is not, keeping families apart this Christmas. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Churchill.
After months of uncertainty, the province of Manitoba says it will be injecting some much-needed cash to the Winnipeg Art Gallery's Inuit Art Centre. Brittany Hobson brings us more.
The Manitoba government has finally announced they will be contributing $10 million to the construction of the Winnipeg Art Gallery's Inuit Art Centre. This comes after months of silence from the Conservative government. At the announcement, Stephen Boris, director of the gallery, said the $65 million expansion project will put Inuit art on the map.
It will be a platform for Inuit who use art as a voice and a language to celebrate their stories with the world for generations to come.
The $10 million will be contributed over the course of 5 years. But that is $5 million less than what they were promised by the previous NDP government. The gallery says they will be looking to outside agencies to make up for the shortfall. The new 40,000 square foot 4-story center will be connected to the current gallery building. It will house more than 13,000 artifacts and offer ongoing education in Inuit history.
It allows us to offer a very meaningful path to reconciliation, connecting people across the country.
The province says the center has the ability to attract visitors from across Canada, the U.S., and the world. And with that, a boost in tourism.
We know that there's going to be residual effects with regard to hospitality, hotels, meals, things like that, and of course a real boost to the economy.
The centre is slated to open its doors in 2020. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Time for a quick break, and then we'll take a look back at one of the biggest stories of the year. Stay with us. Here's the rest of Thursday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. -11 in High Level, Fort Chipewyan and Fort McMurray. Cloudy and -4 in Medicine Hat, Lethbridge and Calgary. Over to the west coast, +4 in Victoria, Vancouver and Port Hardy. -9 in Prince George, Fort St. John and Fort Nelson. In Yukon, -1 all the way up in Old Crow, -5 in Rock River. In NWT, -6 in Wrigley and Norman Wells, -8 in Trout Lake, -23 in Sax Harbor, sunny, and -3 in Fort McPherson. The cold returns in Nunavut, sunny, but -36 in Chesterfield, 31 below for Baker Lake and Cambridge Bay, -33 on Thursday in Joe Haven, -35 in Talio. Welcome back. As 2017 comes to a close, APTN National News is looking back on 3 of the big stories of the year. In October, the federal government took a step in resolving a long-standing legal battle for 60 Scoop survivors. But the package excluded Métis adoptees, opened the door for additional lawsuits, and left many upset with the money lawyers were walking away with.
Some of those who fought.
An emotional Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations took to the podium with a number of 60 Scoop survivors by her side. Carolyn Bennett announced an agreement in principle with survivors who were ripped from their homes and adopted out to non-Indigenous families. Chief Marcia Brown Martel, a claimant in the class action, called it a significant day for survivors and Indigenous children.
That their culture, they will not be taken from it. That this time is closing. It is coming to an end. This stealing of children and placing them into something that is not of them, their lifestyle, their ways, their culture is gone from them, language is gone from them, that these days are coming to a close.
The compensation package announced would see adoptees receive up to $50,000.
At the moment, there is from up to $750 million in direct compensation to the survivors, and $50 million into the foundation, and then separate from that is $75 million in terms of legal fees.
The amount lawyers would take home didn't sit well with some survivors. Those frustrations played out on an episode of In Focus shortly after the settlement.
So the lawyers are going to get millions, and someone like Marlene and myself will get $25,000. Like, there seems to be a huge imbalance there.
How many law firms were involved in this settlement? Like, how
Good
many
question.
people
There are 2 law firms in Ontario. There are, I think, another 3 or 4 or 6 or 8, honestly. The number escapes me right now, but if I were to guess, it's around 10 law firms.
So 10 law firms are going to split $75 million, while the rest of us take peanuts.
The settlement is also being criticized for excluding Métis and non-status Indigenous people.
I'm very disappointed that an inclusive agreement couldn't be reached so that this historic moment meant something to all 60 Scoop survivors.
Weeks after the settlement was announced at a rally for 60 Scoop survivors in Winnipeg, some survivors said they were taking legal action to overturn the agreement.
We had no say in this whatsoever. We are looking for a lawyer, and we are going to put a stop to this and go at it again, keep fighting.
In the months following the announced settlement, other law firms have popped up, also looking to fine 60 Scoop survivors for potential action against provinces and child welfare organizations. And here's a look at our photo of the day. Sunrise behind the mountains in Carcross, Yukon, sent in by Linda Dixon. If you want to see your photo on APTN National News, send them to share@aptn.ca. You can also use the hashtag APTN News on Twitter or Instagram. One Indigenous teen's rising football career is taking him south of the border. Rain Slater is only 17 years old, and he signed on to play for the University of North Dakota's Fighting Hawks football team for the 2018 season. Slater is in his last year of high school in Winnipeg, where he's an offensive lineman with the St. John's Tigers. He is Lineman of the Year for the Tigers, and now he's signed his official commitment to the University of North Dakota Fighting Hawks. Grant McMillan is Rain's current coach.
It's a tribute to him for all the hard work that he's put in, the support that his family's given him over his entire career, and it's a great bonus for our program here at St. John's, the fact that we've got a player of his talent and stature.
Congrats to Rain. His proud mother is a member of our APTN National News crew. We wish him all the best as he heads down to UND. And that is your APTN National News for this Wednesday. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.